All right, so you sent us this research paper, and it's all about sharing data from the Internet of Things securely.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, the way they tackle this is pretty ingenious.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about um, making sure that data from all these different devices, so think your smartwatch, think traffic lights,
Right.
even those little sensors that are tracking air quality, they can all like understand each other
Mm-hmm.
and importantly be trusted, especially when it comes to like your personal data.
Absolutely.
That's a
Yeah.
huge challenge, right?
It is.
To
Right.
set up a framework like that.
Yeah.
Think about a smart city where all these devices are like feeding information back and forth.
Right.
You need that data to be accurate and reliable.
Yeah, for things to actually run smoothly.
Exactly. Like if a self-driving car got bad data from a traffic sensor, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a recipe for disaster.
Huge problems.
So this paper dives into how to make that data sharing both safe and efficient.
Right.
And they propose using something called knowledge graphs.
Oh.
It's almost like building a little mini internet just for the data coming from these IoT devices.
And what's really interesting about that approach is that knowledge graphs provide a shared language,
Right.
a way for all these different devices to make sense of the information they're receiving.
Uh-huh.
It moves beyond just raw data. We're
Yeah.
talking about meaning and context.
Which is super important,
Extremely important.
especially when you've got a network of devices from different manufacturers,
Exactly, yeah.
all with their own little quirks.
Absolutely.
But get this, they tested this whole framework out on Raspberry Pis.
I know, it's amazing.
You know, those tiny, affordable computers.
Yeah.
It seems almost too good to be true.
It's very impressive.
Using Raspberry Pis for the testing, I mean, that highlights that
Yeah.
it's feasible, right?
Yes.
In real-world scenarios where you might not have tons of processing power available on every single device.
Right.
Resource efficiency is key.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so let's break down some of their main findings. They actually built a working framework that lets these devices share data in a way that's understandable across the board.
Right.
And they've integrated a bunch of security features to boot.
They were very methodical about the types of trust factors they considered, too,
Okay.
which is something I found particularly interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
We often think about the technical side of security, but they also looked at things like who manufactured a device, where it's located,
Right.
even who deployed it. Those are social aspects that play a big role in how much we trust a data source.
It's like a background check for your devices. And they even came up with a trustability score,
Yeah, based on those factors.
like a rating system for how reliable the data coming from a particular source is likely to be,
Exactly.
which is important because, as we all know,
Not all data is created equal.
right?
And on top of that, to prevent tampering, they integrated blockchain technology into the framework.
Blockchain. So isn't that what cryptocurrencies use?
It is. And it's a fantastic way to secure data.
Okay.
Think of it like creating a tamper-proof seal for each piece of data.
Right.
It ensures that the information hasn't been altered in any way.
Clever. So they're not just thinking about making the data readable, but also keeping it secure.
Yeah, from all angles.
But with all this talk about smart cities and data sharing, what about privacy?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially with regulations like GDPR.
Right.
How does this framework address that?
That's a crucial consideration and one that the authors took seriously.
Okay.
The framework actually checks for user consent before sharing any personal data.
Okay, so it's not just a free-for-all where devices are sharing everything willy-nilly.
No.
We've built in safeguards to protect user privacy from the ground up.
Absolutely.
They also put a lot of emphasis on data quality, using something called SHACL.
Right, and SHACL acts like a quality control filter for the data,
Okay.
ensuring it's complete, accurate, and includes important context. For example, imagine a temperature reading without specifying Celsius or Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
50 degrees could mean very different things.
Okay, I see. Context is key.
It is, especially if machines are making decisions based on that data.
Now, they tested this all on Raspberry Pis, which is impressive.
Yeah.
But they acknowledge they didn't test this on a huge scale.
Yes, scaling this up to thousands of devices in a real-world setting,
Right.
that's the next challenge.
Yeah.
It's one thing to show it works in a lab,
Right.
but quite another to see how it performs in a complex, dynamic environment.
Absolutely. So they've laid a strong foundation, but there's still work to be done.
Right.
But even with that limitation in mind, the results are really exciting.
Yeah, they're very promising.
They found their framework was both lightweight in terms of power consumption
Yes.
and very effective.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What does this all mean in the bigger picture?
Well, this research gives us a glimpse into a future where IoT devices can securely and efficiently communicate with each other. Think about the possibilities.
Okay, like what?
Smart cities that can manage traffic flow in real time,
Hmm?
healthcare systems that can monitor patients remotely with incredible precision.
Self-driving cars that can avoid collisions by talking to each other,
Exactly.
even personalized environments that adjust based on data from your smartwatch.
It's all possible.
It's mind-blowing.
It is. It is.
But this kind of interconnectedness,
Yeah.
it raises some critical questions as well.
Of course it does.
For example, how do we ensure this level of data interoperability across different platforms and ecosystems?
Right.
Right now, the IoT landscape can feel very fragmented.
It can. It
And
can.
it's like everyone's speaking different languages and we need a universal translator.
We do.
But maybe this research is a step in that direction.
I think it is. Yeah, it's a promising start.
And the authors have given us a lot to think about,
They have.
both in terms of the technical solutions
Yeah.
and the broader implications of a truly interconnected world.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely feeling inspired, but also a little cautious.
Right, right.
It's exciting to think about all the good this technology could do,
Of course.
but we need to be mindful of the potential downsides too.
Yeah, absolutely. As with any powerful tool,
Right.
there's always the potential for misuse.
Right. We can't just get caught up in the shiny new tech without considering the potential consequences.
Exactly.
Data privacy, algorithmic bias, even the potential for hacking. These are all things we need to address as we move forward.
You're raising some important points.
It's a balancing act.
It is.
Finding that sweet spot where we can harness the incredible power of the IoT to improve our lives
Yeah.
while mitigating the risks.
Exactly.
Totally. And that's why discussions like this are so vital.
I agree.
We need to keep asking those tough questions and having open conversations about the future we're building.
It's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we use it
Right.
and what kind of world we want to create with it.
Well said. So listener, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the technical innovations of this framework, discussed the potential benefits and challenges,
Right?
and even delved into some of the broader ethical and societal implications.
Yes.
But there's still so much more to unpack.
I agree.
The Internet of Things is a vast and evolving landscape.
It is. It is.
This research is just one piece of the puzzle, but it offers a fascinating glimpse into what the future might hold.
I think so.
So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into this paper
Okay.
and explore even more about its potential impact on our lives.
Sounds good. And one thing that really stood out to me in this research was how the authors emphasized the importance of considering the entire life cycle of the data.
Okay, break that down for me. What do they mean by life cycle in this context?
Well, it's not enough to just focus on how the data is initially collected and shared.
Right.
We need to think about how that data is stored, processed, analyzed, and eventually even deleted. Each stage of that life cycle presents its own unique set of challenges and opportunities when it comes to security and privacy.
So even if the initial data sharing is secure,
Yeah.
we can't just assume that the data will remain protected forever.
Exactly. The data could be analyzed in ways that weren't originally intended,
Right.
or combined with other data sets to reveal sensitive information that wasn't apparent before.
That's a bit unnerving, to be honest.
Yeah.
It feels like the more connected we become, the harder it is to control how our data is used.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the need for clear and comprehensive data governance policies,
Right.
not just at the level of individual devices or networks, but at a societal level as well.
Like we need a whole new rule book for this data-driven world.
Yeah, we do.
And speaking of rules, this paper specifically mentions GDPR,
Right.
which I know is a big deal in Europe when it comes to data protection.
GDPR has definitely set a precedent for data privacy regulations globally. It's interesting to see how the researchers try to incorporate those principles directly into their framework.
It makes you wonder if this kind of approach could actually make GDPR compliance easier for companies that are dealing with massive amounts of IoT data.
It's certainly possible by building in consent mechanisms and data transparency from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It could streamline the process of adhering to those regulations.
So instead of trying to bolt on privacy features as an afterthought, they're baking it into the core of the system.
Precisely. And that's a crucial shift in thinking,
Right.
especially as the IoT continues to grow and evolve.
Okay, so we've covered the technical innovations, the security features, the privacy considerations, and even touched on the legal landscape.
Yeah.
But what about the potential unintended consequences?
It's a very important point.
Technology has a way of surprising us sometimes in ways we don't anticipate.
Even with the best intentions, the unintended consequences of new technologies can be far-reaching.
It reminds me of how social media was supposed to bring people together and make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And while it's done that in some ways,
Right.
it's also had some pretty significant downsides
Yeah.
that no one really foresaw.
Yes, the comparison is apt, and the same could be true for the IoT.
Okay.
We need to be prepared for the possibility that even the most beneficial technologies can have ripple effects that we didn't anticipate.
So it's not just about building cool new gadgets.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the potential impact they can have on society as a whole.
Exactly. And that requires a collaborative effort between technologists, policymakers, ethicists, and the general public.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
We all have a stake in shaping this future.
All right, listener, let's pause for a moment and consider this.
Okay.
Imagine you're living in a smart city where everything is connected.
Right.
Traffic lights, energy grids, even your home appliances.
Yeah.
What's your biggest hope for that future, and what's your biggest fear?
It's a thought-provoking question, isn't it?
Think about it for a second.
Because the potential benefits of a truly interconnected world are enormous.
Right.
But so are the potential risks.
On one hand, we could have cities that are incredibly efficient,
Yeah.
sustainable, and responsive to the needs of their citizens.
But on the other hand, we could have cities where data is used to control and manipulate people,
Oh.
where privacy is eroded, and where power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few tech giants.
Okay, that's getting a bit dystopian.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. We need to be realistic about the potential downsides, even as we strive for the positive outcomes.
So bringing this back to the research paper,
Yeah.
how does this framework address those concerns about the potential for things to go wrong?
Well, the focus on trust and transparency is a good starting point.
Okay.
By baking those principles into the core of the system,
Right.
it creates a foundation for a more ethical and responsible IoT ecosystem.
And the consent mechanisms they built in are crucial too.
Absolutely.
It gives individuals more control over how their data is used,
Right.
which is essential for maintaining privacy in a hyper-connected world.
Right. It's not a foolproof solution,
Okay.
but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it demonstrates that the researchers are thinking beyond just the technical aspects of the problem
Right.
and considering the human element as well.
Which honestly gives me a bit more hope for the future.
Me too.
It shows
Yeah.
that we can design technology in a way that aligns with our values.
It's a reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in this technological revolution.
Right.
We have the power to shape it and ensure that it benefits all of humanity.
And that's a powerful message.
It is.
It's not about technology controlling us. It's about us using technology to create a better world.
Precisely.
Right.
And it's a reminder that we need to stay engaged in the conversation,
Okay.
to keep asking questions, and to hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. This is not a spectator sport,
Yeah.
listener. We all have a role to play in shaping the future of the Internet of Things.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the practical applications of this research.
Okay.
Because as impressive as this framework is,
Right.
it's ultimately just a set of ideas on paper unless it can be implemented in the real world.
Right. So where could we actually see this kind of technology being used?
Well, the author specifically mentioned smart cities as a potential use case.
Okay.
And it's easy to see why. Imagine a city where all the infrastructure, from traffic lights and streetlights to waste management systems,
Right.
is connected and sharing data seamlessly.
That sounds incredibly efficient.
It could be.
We could be talking about reduced traffic congestion, lower energy consumption,
Yeah.
and even more responsive emergency services.
Exactly. And because the framework is designed to work on devices with limited resources, it could be implemented even in cities that don't have the most advanced infrastructure.
So it's not just a solution for those futuristic megacities.
Oh.
It could benefit smaller communities as well.
Precisely. And beyond smart cities, we could see applications in healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing,
Okay.
virtually any industry that relies on data from connected devices.
Okay, so the potential applications are vast.
Yeah, they are.
But I'm curious, what are some of the challenges of actually implementing this framework in the real world?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles, as we've touched on before, is interoperability.
Right.
Getting different systems from different manufacturers to talk to each other is incredibly complex.
It's like trying to get people from all over the world to communicate, even though they speak different languages.
That's a great analogy, and it's why the author's use of knowledge graphs is so promising.
Okay.
By providing a common language for data exchange.
Yeah.
It could help to overcome some of those interoperability barriers.
But even with a common language, there's still the issue of trust.
Yeah, of course.
How do we know that the data we're receiving is accurate and hasn't been tampered with?
That's where the trustability score and the blockchain integration come in.
Okay.
By establishing a system of accountability and verification.
Right.
We can build confidence in the data and ensure that it's reliable.
So it's not just about connecting things, it's about connecting them in a way that is secure, reliable, and trustworthy.
Exactly, and that requires a holistic approach.
Right.
That considers not just the technical aspects, but also the human and societal implications.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But I'm sensing that we're only scratching the surface of this topic.
You're right. The Internet of Things is still in its early stages.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are truly mind-boggling.
And it's exciting to think about how research like this could shape the future.
Indeed. It's a reminder that we're not just passive observers in this technological revolution.
Okay.
We have the power to shape it, to guide it,
Right.
and to ensure that it benefits all of humanity.
That's a powerful thought. But before we get too carried away with our utopian visions, let's take a step back and consider some of the potential downsides of this interconnected future.
You're right. It's important to be realistic about the potential risks as well.
Okay.
We've already touched on some of them, like data privacy and security breaches.
Right.
But there are other concerns that we need to consider as well.
Like what?
Well, imagine a world where every aspect of your life is monitored and controlled by data.
Okay.
Your movements are tracked, your purchases are analyzed, your social interactions are scrutinized.
Okay, that's definitely giving me some Big Brother vibes.
Yeah, it is a bit creepy.
And it's not just about government surveillance.
No, corporations could use this data to manipulate your behavior,
Okay.
to target you with personalized advertising, or even to deny you services based on your perceived risk profile.
So it's like the digital divide could become even wider,
Yeah.
with those who have access to data and technology having even more power and control over those who don't.
It's a valid concern, and it's why we need to be thoughtful about how we design and implement these systems.
Okay.
We need to ensure that they empower individuals, not control them.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the values and principles that guide its development and use.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to raise awareness about the potential risks, and to advocate for policies that protect individual rights and freedoms in this new digital landscape.
And speaking of policies, this research paper specifically mentions GDPR, which I know is a big deal in Europe.
GDPR is a landmark regulation that has set a precedent for data protection around the world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how the researchers have tried to bake those principles into their framework.
It makes me wonder if this kind of approach could help make GDPR compliance easier for companies that are dealing with tons of IoT data.
It's certainly possible by building in consent mechanisms and ensuring data transparency from the ground up.
Okay.
It could simplify the process of adhering to these regulations.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits and risks of the IoT,
Yeah.
and we've even touched on the legal landscape.
Right.
But I'm curious, what about the economic implications?
Hmm.
Who stands to gain the most from this interconnected future?
Well, it's safe to say that the tech giants are well-positioned to capitalize on the IoT revolution.
Right.
They already have vast amounts of data, sophisticated algorithms, and global reach.
So it's like they're building the infrastructure for this new world,
Yeah.
and they're likely to reap the biggest rewards.
That's likely, but it's not necessarily a winner-take-all scenario.
Right.
There's also potential for smaller companies and startups to innovate and disrupt in this space.
I guess it's all about finding the right niche, the right application, the right way to connect the dots and create value.
Precisely. And the beauty of the IoT is that it's still relatively early in its development.
Okay.
There's a lot of room for experimentation, creativity, and even serendipity.
So it's like the Wild West of the digital world.
Yeah, it is.
Exciting, unpredictable, and potentially very lucrative.
It's an apt comparison, and it's why it's so important for us to stay informed, to engage in the debate, and to ensure that the IoT develops in a way that benefits all of society, not just a select few.
Okay, listener, I'm going to hit you with another thought experiment.
Okay.
Imagine you have the power to design the perfect IoT ecosystem.
Interesting.
What would it look like? What features would it have? What problems would it solve?
It's a fascinating exercise, isn't it?
Let your imagination run wild.
To think about how we can harness this technology to create a world that is more efficient, equitable, and sustainable.
I'm picturing a world where we can monitor and manage our natural resources in real time,
Yeah.
where we can optimize energy consumption to reduce our carbon footprint,
Right.
where we can connect people and communities in ways that were never before possible.
And imagine the possibilities in healthcare.
Yeah.
Remote patient monitoring, personalized treatment plans. Early detection of diseases, the potential to improve human health is enormous.
But let's not forget about the importance of privacy and security.
Right, of course.
In this ideal IoT world, individuals would have complete control over their data,
Yes.
and they would be able to trust that it's being used responsibly.
We would need robust security measures to prevent breaches and hacks.
Right.
And we would need clear regulations to prevent the misuse of data.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
We want to unlock the full potential of the IoT, but we also need to safeguard individual rights and freedoms.
And it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
Yeah.
As the technology evolves, new challenges and opportunities will emerge.
Right.
And we need to be prepared to adapt and respond in a thoughtful and responsible way.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah, me too.
It's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we use it, how we govern it,
Right.
and how we ensure that it serves the best interests of humanity.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
The IoT has the potential to be a powerful tool for progress,
Yeah.
but it's up to us to ensure that it's used wisely.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close. So, listener, we've spent this deep dive exploring the potential of the Internet of Things.
Yeah,
And I hope you're walking away with a sense of both the incredible possibilities
absolutely.
and the challenges that come with this level of interconnectedness.
It's a complex landscape for sure,
It is. It is.
but this research really shines a light on how we can build a more trustworthy and secure IoT ecosystem.
And they've given us a practical roadmap for how to get there,
Right.
even if it's going to take time and a lot of collaboration to fully realize.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping this future.
Right.
Whether you're a developer, a policymaker, or just someone who uses smart devices in your daily life.
Yeah.
Your voice matters in this conversation.
You know, through this deep dive, we've talked a lot about data.
Yeah, it's a
How it's collected, shared, analyzed, and ultimately how it's used. But it's important to remember that data is just a tool.
It's a powerful tool.
It is a powerful tool.
No doubt. But it's up to us to decide how we wield that power.
Exactly. Will we use it to create a world that is more equitable, more sustainable, more humane?
It's a big question.
Or will we allow it to be used to control and manipulate us?
Yeah, it's a choice we have to make.
And it's a choice we need to make collectively as a society.
I agree.
The implications of this technology are far-reaching, and we all have a stake in the outcome.
Absolutely.
So, listener, let's choose wisely.
Let's hope so.
Let's use the power of the Internet of Things to build a world that we can all be proud of.
A world where technology truly serves humanity.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, it was great.
We'll see you next time.